Many years ago, I was asked a very interesting question. Somebody asked me a question, they raised their hand in a seminar and said, Tony, can you change people that don't want to change? Of course you can change people who don't want to change. All you need is the right kind of. If you have enough leverage where change becomes an absolute. Now for some people, leverage is not even the threat of their own life. Some people would rather die than have you tell them what to do. And so that's not the leverage. The leverage for them might be something for their children. Leverage for them might be spiritual growth. All of us have a leverage point. If you find the leverage, not the leverage you make someone do it, the leverage that will make them make themselves do it. We all have some place that will get us to follow through. Now, if you get enough leverage and if you interrupt the pattern enough, how many of you ever had a pattern when you were a kid and you had like some obnoxious uncle or something and you were trying to be upset and they'd come like rub your damn head or something that should make you crazy and you couldn't stay upset because they kept doing this to you? How many had this happen? Say aye. If you have enough leverage and you break someone's pattern enough times, a new pattern will show up. If you're conscious, you can create the new pattern. So the answer is yes. Now then the question would be, Tony, if all it takes is leverage, then why don't most people change? And I had a lot of answers for that, but that night, I'm a night person. That night, I'm wired up after a seminar. It's like 2 o'clock in the morning. It was December. And so I flip on the television in the back for some white noise, looking for CNN, and I come across the old Christmas classic, this Christmas Carol, right? A Dickens classic. And I see it in black and white, and I start watching the movie, and I'm remembering it from being a kid. And as I'm watching this thing, I see this man named Scrooge who clearly doesn't want to change. In fact, he's certain he doesn't need to change because what's happened is his life went through a lot of pain. And when he got pain, he looked for the source of that pain, and he said it was being close to people. So we decided it's people equals pain. Remember the red squares we talked about? So now he wants to avoid people, and he's mean to people. Now, he's also very wealthy financially. He makes up this belief that because I'm mean and tough with people, I'm rich. The truth is he's financially rich. If you watch the movie, you read the story, when everybody else is gone, who's still working? He is. He's hardworking, he's thrifty, he's smart, he's intelligent, but he thinks he's rich because he's mean. So he doesn't want to lose being rich. He doesn't want to lose not being hurt. So he has a belief. Be mean to people and everything works out, even though he's miserable. Can we have beliefs that make no sense and yet still believe them, yes or no? Sure, we just get wired. So I'm watching this guy. Now, the only way people change is if they associate either enough what? Pain, so they have to change, or they associate changing will equal enough what? And ideally, if you get both, you'll change. If you get, every moment I do this, the pain's getting more and more intense, there's a point where you must change. And if I change, I get all this pleasure, you're going to want to change. How many follow? But what equals pain and what equals pleasure is what you associate in your nervous system. So what happens is, the only way you create change is changing what you link pain and what you link pleasure to in your nervous system, not just in your head, in your gut. That's what controls you. Lots of times in your head, you know what you should do, but your gut takes over. Your fear or your greed or your desire or your comfort or whatever. Who knows what I'm talking about here? Say aye. But watch this. How many of you used to have a favorite dessert or a food or a form of alcohol that you really, really, really loved? And then one night you had an experience like never before, where something happened, where this food or this drink or this alcohol that you love so much, it went down, but it kept coming back up at a level of intensity and with enough aroma and pain and association that to this day, it takes no willpower just to think of that alcohol or think of the smell of that food or look at it makes you appalled, makes you repelled. Who's had an experience like this in your life? Say aye. Tell me what that change was. Was that a change in willpower? No. All that happened is your brain changed what it used to link pleasure to, it now links pain to. When you link enough pain, it takes no willpower, you're going to avoid it. The problem is some of you are linking pain to things you need, like exercise, right? Or pain what you need, like a relationship, right? And it's the wrong association, but it's going to control your life. Your job is to change what you link pain and pleasure to. So that night, what was pleasure became pain, and now it takes no willpower, you just avoid it. So we call that changing what you associate to things in your nervous system, or for short, a neuroassociative change. In other words, changing in your nervous system, what you associate pain and pleasure to. So, by the way, in this Christmas Carol story, does this man Scrooge change his life, yes or no? He didn't want to change. Does he change his life a little or completely? And by the way, how fast? At a heartbeat, in one evening. How does it happen? 3 neuroassociative conditioning specialists show up at his house. Right? 3 ghosts show up, and what do? They get him to link a massive, unbearable amount of what? To all the things he did in the past around people. Then they go to everything he has in the present, pain, and everything in the future, pain, till there's so much, there was nowhere to escape. Here's the other reason why people don't change. Because right now, my relationship's in pain. But it was good in the past. So you escape having to change by remembering a good time. Or I might be coughing and having these problems with cigarettes right now, but you know what? George Burns lived to be 102. He smoked cigars, by the way, and he's 1 out of 10 billion people that pulled that off. But let's not confuse ourselves with ratios. So you make up what the future is. If your present is painful, you can escape to the past and get out of the pressure to change. How many follow this? Say I. Or you can escape to a future because no one knows what it is for sure and you can make it up. But if your brain links, it's been painful in the what? Past, and it's even worse in the, it'll change like that. Who here has ever stayed in a relationship that you knew was not right for you? It wasn't right for you, it wasn't right for them. Who has ever stayed in a relationship way too long? Who's done this before? Raise your hand. Say I. It wasn't good for you, it wasn't good for them, yet you stayed. Why? Why? Because even though it's painful in the present, what'd you do? You said, it'll get better over there in the future. Who finally changed? Who here finally changed that? Say I. How'd you do it? Your brain went, it's painful now, it was painful in the past, it's going to be worse in the future, that's it. That's what I call a Dickens pattern. When you lock in pain in all those places, there's no place to escape, so you change. It's like if you put a wall here, and a wall here, and we close them in on you, amazingly, you'll move forward. That's what we're talking about. Giving yourself leverage on yourself that way, not having someone else do it to you, you do it to yourself. That's when you got the power again. How many get it? Say I. So, think about what's the holy grail between somebody taking action or not. It's one word, certainty. When somebody is absolutely certain, the common word is believe, right? But, you can believe at a general level or you can believe with certain. When you're absolutely certain that if I do this, it's going to get that result and that result's going to change my life, you'll do it. When you think it absolutely is not going to work, you're never going to do it. The middle no man's land of maybe it'll work, maybe it won't, that's the piece that kills people, right? So if it's a must for you, you got to make it work, right? In our case, right? That's an example. If it's not a must for you and you're not sure, you don't know what to do. So years ago, I'd look around and say, okay, how do people get themselves to follow through that haven't been following through? What's the difference? And I started interviewing hundreds of people, literally, and eventually thousands, because I had thousands of my events. So I'd ask the group to give me their feedback. And I came up with this model. It's like the holy grail of belief, or the holy grail of momentum. It's like the difference between what makes the rich get richer and the poor get poor, right? And the difference we all know is mindset, but like, how's that built? So this is what I did. I created stupid little 4 little boxes, and I'll scribble it here for you. You think about the first thing that determines whether you can do something or not, and I put that in this first box at the top here on the left side, and it's potential. Like, what's the potential of a human being? Like, when you guys started, you proved something no one had done in history. You ran the 4-minute mile, right? For golly knows how many centuries, they're trying to run a 4-minute mile. Roger Bannister does it. How did he do it? Do you remember? You did it in this industry, right? You made $1 million in a day. No one had ever done that in history, right? After you did it, a bunch of other guys are doing it because it became possible. Roger Bannister didn't just go physically practice. He made a shift in his head. He practiced in his head because he could never achieve it physically, so he had to change in his head first so that the result became certain enough he believed it, and then his body got him through. After Roger Bannister ran that 4-minute mile, within 2 years, 37 people ran a 4-minute mile.
Wow.
When no one in history had ever done it. Now, here's how it works. The potential for anybody getting your product is extraordinary. They could do what you've done as much, more or less. They can do whatever they want to do. The potential's there. The market's proven that. Whether or not they tap into that potential has a lot to do with what action they take, which is the question you came to me with, right? Like, you know, God, they all this potential, but they're not taking action. And we all know that the action they take is going to determine the results they get. That's pretty obvious. So most people have a belief about what their real potential is no matter what you tell them. And that affects how much action they take. And of course, that affects the result. And then ironically, that result reinforces their belief. And then that belief affects it. So I'll give you an example. Let's say a person has unlimited potential, we all agree. But they take little action, little results. Why? Because they have to start with a problem with their belief. They don't believe it's really going to happen for me. Maybe for Frank Kearns because he's got the cool hair and stuff, or maybe it's for you because you're so driven, but it's not me. Maybe Tony Robbins because he's a freak, got these big teeth. Whatever their thought process is, right? They got this thing, right? But what happens is, if you believe that there's very little potential, how much action are you going to take? Nothing, little. And when you take little potential with a little action, what kind of results do you get? Lousy little results. And when you get little results, what does that do to your belief? You go, see, I told you this was a waste of time, told you this wouldn't work. And then what happens? You tap even less potential. You take even less action. You get even worse results, and your belief gets even weaker. And this sucker feeds on itself until you are in a downward spiral.
It's poisonous.
It's poisonous and it's self-fulfilling. Now, what if something could happen that could come along and fill you with a sense of absolute certainty? Not like I believe, but where you know. In you guys' case, mine as well, we knew because we had to. Because we burned the boats. There was no other option. We had to find a way. We weren't going to live that way. We all did it in different ways and for different reasons, but in essence, that was it. If you get yourself in a state of certainty that this is going to work, I'm going to find the way, and if this doesn't work, I will make the way, then you tap a lot more potential. And when you're certain in your potential, you take massive action. And when you take massive action, you really believe in something, you get great results. When you get great results, your brain goes, see, I told you I was a stud. I told you this thing would work out. Now you're even stronger. You tap more potential, take greater action, greater results. That's how you went from $300 in a week to $2,500 in 5 days to $100,000 in a month to $1 million in a day. Same thing with you. And we get momentum. That's why the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. Now some people go out and they go, well, I'm going to take a bunch of action. All right, I'm going to open this product. I'm going to try it. And they'll say to you, I even did it. But it's like a salesman who goes and knocks on the door, and he knocks on 100 doors and says,
you don't want one of these, do you?
yeah, exactly right. You know? And even if he doesn't say it verbally, his face says it because he doesn't believe it's going to work. So his voice, his body, the execution is so weak. Maybe if he talks to 100 people, somebody's going to buy out of pity. They don't want his kids to starve, right? But he's not going to get the result. So the core difference in people is how do you produce certainty when the world isn't giving it to you? You go out and you try. In your case, you're 100,000 in debt and nothing's working. How do you keep yourself going? The way you did it, the way I did it, the way you're doing it, we may not have done it consciously, is we didn't change our potential. That was there. And it wasn't even taking more action. Taking more action with a belief it's not going to work, it's not going to change anything. We got results in our head that made us feel certain as if it had already happened. True or false for you?
True.
Right? So give me an example so people know I'm not just making this crap up.
Well, I mean, just like when I had nothing, I already knew I was driving like Ferraris and Porsches and stuff because I always wanted those cars. I already knew I was going to have them. It was inevitable.
Right.
I inevitably, that was just my inevitable outcome.
But how did you do that? Did you have a ritual? Did you think about it regularly? Was it one time you thought about it, or was it something you had an obsession towards?
I had an obsession towards it. I mean, I used to work in a video store, which was the last job I ever had in my life.
Thank God.
And I used to go to work almost every day, and I used to bring 2 magazines with me to read on my breaks. Entrepreneur magazine, just to read about business and everything else, to read about what other people are doing, look for role models. And I used to carry an auto trader with me. And I used to look at Porsches that were for sale.
Yeah.
And people always used to ask me, what are you doing with that Auto Trader magazine? I'm like, well, I'm just picking out the Porsche that I'm going to buy.
Right.
Which
probably got you a lot of crap.
I did. People made fun of me.
Sure.
I actually had a boss at that job tell me, you really shouldn't do that to yourself, John, because it's very, very likely that is never going to happen. That it's very likely that you're never going to have that car.
Yeah.
That's the kind of belief he was trying to put in my head. And I was like, no, you don't realize that it's inevitable that I will drive here sometime in the near future with that car when I'm not working for you and drop movies off for you to put back on the shelf. And that actually happened. And it was one of the most fulfilling days of my entire life. And the great thing was when I pulled up in this car, I was in my mid-20s, a car that most mid-20s...
What kind of car was it?
It was a Porsche 911 Turbo. It was a convertible and everything. It was a beautiful car. It was one I always dreamed of having. But, for a few years, I always circled the ads of which ones I was going to buy. Well, when I finally got it and I pulled up at the store, I had all these people, some people that were still working at this $7 an hour job were there years after I left. And I'll never forget this, even the boss and stuff, and the reaction of the people was like, wow, that is awesome. Yeah. Is that your dad's car? And all I said to them was, not exactly.
Good for
you. And I just smiled and just left. But it was, it's the weirdest thing, but I just knew it was going to happen.
But you knew it because
I conditioned myself
you
to
did it over and over again.
Yeah.
When I was in high school, I was not a popular kid, but I was passionate and intense, and I'll never forget. Some particular girls gave me some crap, and a guy too. And I wrote in their journals or their annual yearbook at the end, I wrote, someday, I said, you treated me like hell. Someday I'll be rich and famous, and you'll be an effing truck driver. And you'll be sitting there, I'll be with with this beautiful woman of my life, rich, and you'll be watching me on television thinking, you wish you would have treated me better. I actually wrote this shit in people's annuals because I went to a 10-year high school reunion and people showed me this stuff,
great.
Right? But it's like, I burned the bridges, baby. I was like, this is how it's going to be. So I'll give you a perfect example of this. They did studies, many have been done at this element, where they want to say, how much does the mind affect performance? So they take basketball. And I've worked with a lot of NBA players and turned them around, and one of the problems many of them have is they'll choke on the free throw line. Well, everybody knows in that case, if you normally shoot really well and now you're not, something's interfering. Something's getting in front of your state, some uncertainty, right? Obviously. So they take a group and say, we're going to make them better. How do you make somebody better who has got this mental block? So they take a group of guys and they're going to do free throws, and they do one group where they just practice for 6 weeks. Totally intense practice, and I forget the number of free throws, but they got to do this many free throws every day. Take a second group, and they have them not practice at all. Obvious. And they take a third group and they don't let them touch a basketball. All they do is have them practice in their mind, but the key is it's not practice makes perfect, it's perfect practice makes perfect, as corny as that sounds. So these guys see themselves making the shot every single time, conditioning their mind and body that it's perfect every time. They're not interrupted by a reality that would screw with them. So at the end of 6 weeks, they tally it up, and now they give them a test to see who has the highest free throw percentage success. What do you guess it's going to be? Well, the obvious person says, obviously, it's not the guys that didn't practice, but which one is it, the mind, or is it the ones that actually practice?
I'm assuming the mind.
Yeah, you would assume it because it's true.
Right.
You intuitively know the truth, that practicing's not enough. It's getting yourself so certain so many times that now when you go to do it, there's no hesitancy, and you execute. It's having that absolute certainty that makes you tap your full potential, take massive action, get